covering the world of professional wrestling from post to post. A show for the busted open nation. This is the Nation's Corner. Here are your hosts, Front Row, Tony Justice, and Ezra Vickery.
Hey, what's up, pro wrestling fans? Welcome to the Nation's Corner. I am Front Row, as always. Joining me tonight is Tony Justice and special guest Ezra. So before we jump into all the stuff that we want to cover tonight in the world of pro wrestling, as we know, today is the 20th anniversary of that terrible day back in 2001, September 11th. So I kind of wanted to touch on that and get your opinions on, or your feelings for what that day was, how it impacted you, and sort of your memories from from that day. I know, Ezra, you're a little younger than me, as I'm about to turn 50, so I might have more memory of that day than you. But so first, let's start off with, how was your weeks? Like, how's everything going? Tony, what are you up to this week?
Man, I'm out here just delivering justice. That's all I do nowadays, man. It's just drive from state to state, delivering all types of justice. So I'm doing good, man. I'm in Clearwater, Minnesota right now, just living the dream.
Ezra?
Yeah, same old, man. After a great weekend with All Out weekend, which we'll discuss later in the show, I'm getting back into swing of things, getting back to, unfortunately, daily life. Yawn. But otherwise, I'm doing good, man. I'm ready to do the show with y'all tonight and get ready to talk some pro wrestling. Let's do it. Let's rock and roll.
Awesome. So let me kick things off and just share. So in 2001, I was working for AT&T at the time. I don't work there now. And I worked about 25 minutes outside of Manhattan in New Jersey at the headquarters building. And I was supposed to be at the World Trade Center that day for a training class. I still have the email somewhere, the confirmation emails. And my friend and I both had muscle cars. Like, he had a Mustang, I had a Camaro. It was a beautiful day. We decided we were going to go ahead and drive our muscle cars to work and skip the conference. We were like, okay, that's fine. We won't go there. And I didn't have a cell phone at the time, or not one that would work in that car. So we were on our way to work, and my friend pulled over, and he said, my wife just called me and said there was an accident, and that like a small plane had hit the World Trade Center. And at that point in time, we thought maybe a small plane had collided accidentally with the World Trade Center. So we got in our cars, we went to work. By the time we got to work, the building where I was working was a data center. It was called, it's a military target. They were rushing everybody out of the building, and we went in through the garage and went down into the cafeteria, and everybody was gathered there around the TVs, and we saw the second plane hit. And at that point, we got caught up and really understood like what was going on. And it was scary because one of the helicopter pilots there, one of the corporate pilots, was also a military guy, and he was pulled out to go rush and do some air rescue stuff. So I got on the highway. They said they kicked everybody out of the building. They said, everybody go home. They were in lockdown. Just go home. So I was on my way on Route 80 out of New Jersey towards Pennsylvania, where we were living at the time. And the other way, all we saw were jets headed towards the city. And we saw state cruisers, police, fire, everybody, like on the other side going eastbound into the city. It was just a nonstop, train of rescue vehicles and stuff. And we saw, it's the first time I've ever seen military aircraft like going actively towards, an active zone. So I got home, and, Mrs. Front Row and I were there with our little baby Cameron, who was less than a year old at that point, and our other son. And it was a scary day because we didn't really know what was going on. Like, news was trickling in. At first we heard that there was another plane had hit the Pentagon, and then someone said it was a helicopter, and then there was other reports of some plane flying around that was headed towards the White House. So we knew at that point that the world had changed, and that our homeland had been attacked, and this was a first for me. Like, it was so. you know, seeing, and we had friends that I worked with at AT&T that were in the tower that day. A couple of them did survive and a couple of them did not. So everybody has, you know, their own experiences with this. So Tony, what do you remember from that day?
Well, I was working at Walmart Distribution Center at the time. I was a yard driver, which, you know, we were out in the yard, you know, moving trailers around. You know, when a trailer gets filled up at the shipping dock, you know, we pull the trailer out of the dock and move it to a staging area for the store drivers to come pick them up and take them to the stores. And so my partner had gone to break, and so I was kicked back on the shipping dock with my feet up on the dash. I was caught up with everything, so I was just kind of dozed off, waiting on him to get back. I'm telling on myself now. But anyway, I was dozed off on the shipping dock, and I had my radio, my FM radio, turned up just a hair where I could hear it. And you know, when I went, you know, took a nap, you know, there was music playing. So when I you know came out of my sleep, I heard someone talking about a plane hitting the World Trade Center. And so I thought to myself, I remember thinking to myself as I was waking up, wow, that sounds like a cool movie. Because I thought they were talking about a movie. And then so I woke up right as, you know, about 5 minutes later, they said that a second plane had hit. And then I was like, this isn't a movie, you know? And so my partner, I was waiting on him to come back from break. Well, he come back from break and he told me, he says, Tony, man, did you hear the news? I said, yeah. He said, all the drivers are in the break room and watching it on TV. He said, man, it's crazy. And so I went to break and walked in there, and all the drivers were standing around watching the TV, you know, and I saw it actually visually for the first time, and I could not believe it. And so it was that day where all the break rooms at Walmart Distribution Center, they went and got flat screen TVs for every break room so that the associates could look at and watch the news. And, you know, I just could not believe what had happened. I knew that our I didn't realize at the time, but our nation, you know, changed that day. And you know, the day after, you know, the solidarity that our nation had was just awesome to see us all come together as a nation. And it was later on that month that I joined the Navy, partly because I was pissed off at what they did to us, and I wanted to strike back as however I could, you know. So I joined the Navy September 27th of that year, and left December of that year. So those are my memories from it. It's just, I just can't believe it's been 20 years ago.
Yeah. So I know, Ezra, you're a little younger, but like growing up, you know, how was, I guess my question to you is, how was that day presented to you, you know, from an educational standpoint? Like, was it through friends and family or through school or?
Actually, I think 12 years old. This was about 2003. I was in fourth grade. They actually, after the first plane hit, they pulled everybody out of their classrooms, put them in the library, and had several TVs on you know how the TVs would sit on the racks. They had TVs that were connected to cable, and they sat them all and had all the students watch as the second plane hit the building and the buildings collapsed. So we actually got to see it in real time. As you know, being only 12 years old, you weren't knowing what's going on. You're busy, you know. You're only a small kid, but it only took a year to really learn that what this truly meant, and how horrific and how deadly this was, and how as a nation, you know, it was a critical moment where, unfortunately, we ended up letting our guard down for one single solitary minute, and this is what happened. And we knew then, and I knew then that, you know, I felt anger. I felt, you know, sadness on how could we let this happen? You know, how could we let these guys get on these planes and hijack them and drive them into buildings, drive them into the Pentagon, drive them into a field? You know, how can you let that go? And, you know, it was that, and it was just sad to, you know, you got to think nearly 3,000 people lost their lives that day. And it was sad because, you know, it could have been family, friends. You never know, because we all have people all over the U.S. who are friends, family, and all this stuff. And it's something that resonates with me to this day. And and our country came back stronger than ever. We did what we could. We took down our enemies. It took a while, but we succeeded in a lot of the things we needed to do after that day. And I think it made our country stronger in the end. And yeah, just as a young kid, it was very impressionable. And, I learned a lot through school. I learned a lot through my parents. My mom was watching live at home when it happened, and with my dad. And they were telling me about it. And, it's still something that'll stick with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, and we've all seen the documentaries and things like that. And we had friends in the area who were part of the first responders and the rescue teams there. And we heard a lot of amazing stories of rescues, of people running up 60 flights, 70 flights to rescue people. And so there was a lot of heroic acts that day. So I did want to shift into, so from a wrestling perspective, if you guys get a chance, go on WWE's YouTube channel or on Peacock. They posted a documentary of the SmackDown after 9/11, and it's pretty incredible. Like I remember watching it, but I don't think I truly understand, because they weren't doing behind the scenes stuff at the time, right? So we didn't really know what it was all about. We just knew that they were doing a show, and I remember thinking at the time, this might be too soon. But then you saw the crowd. In Houston, you saw the crowd and the response to the people that I talked to after that, and it was very impactful, and it had sort of like an FU, to the terrorists. It really felt like for me. It was one of the few times in my life that I really felt like the country had come together and had this, okay, well, we're not going to let this beat us sort of mentality.
Yeah. We needed to show, at that time, we needed to show something that we weren't, it was kind of a therapy in a way for us to kind of cope with what happened. And what better way than to go to a wrestling event to cope with something like that, and to see all the wrestlers on the stage, as Lillian saying, I still get tears in my eyes when I watch that. That was an amazing moment. And for those that were there live, that's a moment that you will never, ever forget. And just the crowd chanting after she was done singing, and the crowd chanting USA, USA, and tears were being shed on that stage from pretty much everyone. That's an amazing moment that needed to happen for this nation, I think. And who better than the WWE to be the ones to spearhead that? Then you started seeing, in baseball and all those, trying to come together too. So it was one of those moments that'll never ever be forgotten.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because they said in the documentary that was the first time that they had that anyone had performed the national anthem and beginning on the SmackDown or a Raw on the broadcast, like they always do at the shows before they go live. And Lillian was just unbelievable. I mean, if you go back and watch that, her performance, and she was super, super nervous. And she said The Rock, comforted her backstage and said, "You're going to be fine. Like, you got this." And she went out there and did the thing. So another thing I didn't know that they mentioned in the documentary was, after the show went off the air, Kurt Angle main evented, and it was, a big America feel good moment. And then the show goes off the air, and Steve Austin came out to address the crowd. This was new to me. I didn't know this stuff because I had not seen the details of this. But, Steve came out, and then The Rock came out to confront him, and he said they tore the house down. Like, they just entertained, because they treated it like it was WrestleMania main event, like they were going to give these people a show. So... yeah, and Mrs. Front, she was scrapbooking pictures from our trip, because it was exactly a year to the day that we were at the World Trade Center in 2000. That was the first time. I had been there once before, but she had not. So we went to do our tour there, and just a year to the day later was that date. So So let's move on. Let's shift gears a little bit here. I wanted to talk about this amazing weekend that you had, Ezra. You were all over the friggin' place in Chicago. It seems like every time I looked at social media, you were part of a party or a show or somebody else's Instagram or so. Like, how did all this start? And like, what were all the events that you went? It seems like you went to everything.
Trust me, I tried to. I couldn't go to everything. There's only so much time in the day, man. And I can only be in one place at one time. If I could split myself into two people, I'd be at GCW the same night I was at the Busted Open party. But but no, it started Thursday with the Pro Wrestling Tees AEW softball game. It was for charity. They raised $13,000 for Paul Chicago, which is a great cause. It was a great game. It was a fun game. Some of them brought their A game, like legit Layla Hirsch. She was playing like she was an MVP in the All-Star game. Freaking Thunder Rosa was killing it out there, of course. Sean Spears using a chair as a bat, and freaking Serpentico getting used as a bat by Luther were priceless. It was a fun day. Got to meet Darby Allin, got to meet the Chaos Project, Jungle Boy, Rebel. It was really cool. For $20, you couldn't beat it, and it was a fun time. But the weekend, man, Friday was a crazy, crazy day. Of course, Chicago traffic sucked, really bad. So getting there took a while, but the show Rampage was awesome. Getting to see so many great moments, including Sky Blue getting added to the Casino Battle Royal. That was a great moment for the local crowd. A girl from Joliet, Illinois does good, man. And that was so cool. And we got to see Punk out there with Darby Allin in their final face-off before All Out. So that was a great event. Next morning, we went to Fan Fest on Saturday, and that was fun. We got to see all sorts of panels, from the Dark Order to Jackbox game panel to Busted Open, where, of course, Thunder Rosa confronted Dave LaGreca again. What a great moment that was. I got to meet FTR, got to meet Thunder herself, who was absolutely awesome. Shout out to Thunder. First time ever meeting her. Also got to meet 2.0, who were great as well. It was a real fun time, some great friends. And then later on that night was probably my favorite moment outside of All Out, was the Nation Across the Nation event. That was getting to hang with Dave, Mark, Gabby, and Ryan, and just doing some fun stuff with them. Everybody was having drinks. Everybody was having a good time. Dave LaGreca came in there saying, the first thing I told everybody, he's like, all right, guys, are we having a good time? He goes, yeah, I just want to let you know before we start this thing, I'm going to let you know I'm going to get fucked up tonight.
That sounds about right.
And immediately he started pounding some daddy sodas. Violetta's just sitting there watching him. And it was a fun time. It was a real fun time. He got into an arm wrestling match with Will Hobbs. Funny part was Mark went to go check on him because it was in another part of this rooftop bar. I asked Mark, I'm like, hey, is Dave all right? He goes, yeah, he's all right, but he ain't going to be able to use his left arm for a while. And it went on to like 11:30 Central, so about midnight. It was a great time. I got to meet all of them, got some autographs from Dave and Gabby, and it was a great, awesome event by them. Thank you to Dave and the Busted Open crew for that. That was something that we all needed as fans, and for the Busted Open Nation to get together and show, how strong we truly are as a group. And then Sunday, of course.
So hang on, I want to put a pause on that. So
yeah.
Two things struck me, right? So you were in the room for Thunder and Violetta teaming up against Dave.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and we've seen this, this is one of my favorite feuds in pro wrestling right now. This goes back to the spring, before Buda, before all of this whole thing started. We were in Buda at the Mission Pro show. We watched Thunder beat the shit out of Dave. He apparently hasn't learned his lesson. He keeps talking crap to her. And, those of us, you've seen her on TV, and if you've seen her wrestle live, like, she's no joke. She hits hard, and she's mean. I mean, she's very nice, but she's also mean when she gets in that ring. And I saw the footage that you had sent, some footage, and I saw it on their social media, where she says she's going to Dave's house. And man, I've talked to Dave, and I'm like, dude, I don't know if this is a good idea. Like, I think you need to get security or something, because Thunder Rosa in your home is dangerous. That's behind enemy lines. And if Violetta is teaming up with Thunder, which they seemed awfully friendly at the show. I don't know what we can expect, but I definitely think that folks need to stay tuned to their social media in the coming weeks. There's been some buzz about some other things happening there, so stay tuned. But I did want to ask you about the Busted Open party, because if you get the opportunity to hang out with the Busted Open team, we have, others have, lots of people have. They're so cool, like Dave and Gabby and Mark and Ryan, and just everybody's super friendly, super cool. But it's not like a meet and greet, right? Like, it's not just, here's some money, we'll have exchange nice words, and then I'll go away. You were there for like 4 or 5 hours hanging out with these people, like partying.
Absolutely. It was a fun time, Dave, and there was no ropes, no nothing. It was just like hanging out with friends. You could go up to Mark and talk to him and have a conversation. Same thing with Dave and Gabby and Violetta if you want. Santana, Will Hobbs, Sean Dean were all there hanging out, having drinks, having a good time with the crew.
Emily.
Emily showed up during the dance contest between Dave and Gabby, which Gabby obviously won, duh. But freaking she told him straight up, it's not over. This is interesting. She gave Dave, when they had the judges, there were 3 judges.
She who? Pronouns, pal.
Okay. That would be Emily.
Okay.
Emily was one of the judges in the dance contest along with Santana and Will Hobbs. She gave Dave the victory, but told him straight up, it's not over. And as soon as she said that, I immediately looked at the entrance to the bar, and I'm like,
You were expecting La Marimera.
I was expecting her to walk up those stairs and take Dave right out of the bar. Or try to throw him over the rooftop. One of the two.
So it looks like a bunch of our group is going to be going up to Philly next weekend to meet up with the Busted Open team again. Tony, you're going to be there. We will not be there, but I know like Deb and Seth and a whole bunch of folks are going to be there. So it looks like it's going to be an awesome time. I'm really hoping. Make sure you post pictures. Make sure you send videos. So yeah, and I did exchange some texts with Dave during that party, and he said that he had met you and spent some time with some other of our group, and it's just really cool that we talked about this. Our group as a whole, this big Busted Open Nation, and there's many people in the nation. We're gathering in groups all over the country, going to shows. Like Trend and Hijacker were in a show in California. Trend has been to everything on the East Coast, I think. We've been to Buda and St. Louis and Atlanta and everywhere in Jersey and New York. It's just like, it's really cool to see people, even people we haven't met in the Busted Open Nation, posting on social media saying, hey, we're doing a cool thing this weekend. Check this out. The Guns N' Roses concert, for example, not even a wrestling event, but just there you go.
Yeah.
So I just think it's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also cool whenever you're at an event with your friends, like we were in St. Louis, and then you get people from the nation coming up to you and saying, you're front row, you're Tony Justice, aren't you? Yeah. And it was cool. Like we met Jay. He come up to us and hung out with us for a little bit. So that was
Shout
cool
out to Jay in St. Louis.
Shout out to Jay in St. Louis. So yeah, it's awesome, man. We're just one big network of people who are into the same thing, and that's Busted Open and professional wrestling. And I mean, it's just an amazing thing how professional wrestling brings people together. And this is just one example.
Yeah, another good example, RA in the chat. RA is going to be going to the Mission Pro show tomorrow, Tussle and Tulsa. And, they're super excited that he's coming to visit, and they're doing all kinds of different shows. They're on the road doing some different things right now. And I know that Thunder Rosa and Melanie and all the folks, Jeremiah and Brian, all the folks at Mission Pro are grateful for the sponsorship that all of the folks in our group contribute to. So it's a big deal to them, and it's a big deal for women's wrestling. So it's another cool thing that the Busted Open Nation gets to do. And the last thing I want to mention about that before you go on, Ezra, is the Busted Open Nation isn't just like fans, right? Because we talk to wrestlers all the time who listen to the show. James Storm has asked both myself and Trenda for pictures because he knows us as Busted Open fans on social media. Like, it's the cowboy, James Storm. We had people at Empower coming up and saying, "Oh, you guys are from the thing," and like they recognize that this part of this Busted Open Nation. So all of this is due, to Dave LaGreca and the team for putting this whole thing together. And I have my new Busted Open shirt on. They have the new merchandise up for sale on there. Go to their Twitter account at Busted Open Radio and look at their pinned tweet and order some of their stuff because it's really cool. And some friends of ours helped design it, so it's pretty cool. So Ezra, moving on from the party, tell us about All Out.
Well, Sunday was a crazy day because they started at 12 with the All Out pre-party that was hosted by the Wingmen. And it was a really, really cool thing. They had a dunk tank that featured Austin Gunn in the dunk tank for charity. They were doing that as well. They also had Max Caster from the Acclaimed doing a rap set before the show too, doing some of his favorite diss tracks from his critically acclaimed album, as well as ending the show with a classic rap that he did on Sunny Kiss a few months ago on AEW Dark. And they did a free meet and greet afterwards. It was awesome. The Wingmen were also meeting people, taking photos for free. It was a great time. It went from like 12 until the doors opened at 5 o'clock. And then once we got in there, we were getting in there, and the lady at the turnstile told us straight there were no more tickets at the door. They sold out. They were officially a sold out show. Not a seat left in the house.
Wow.
They said that they were out of tickets from, I think they said early in the morning they got the last ticket sold from the box office. So 15,000, about 12, I think they said 15,000 packed in there. There wasn't a seat left. Once we got into I was up in the suite in the 200 level with a couple of my friends, and we were sitting there for the buy-in. And the next thing you know, we see a camera get set up, and we're looking over and like, okay. And a guy who I guess works for the Now Arena that my buddy Craig knows told him, okay, you guys should chill, relax here, enjoy what's going to happen. And we're like, what did they mean? And we look up, next thing you know, we look over, Dan Lambert from American Top Team, as you've seen on AEW, and Jorge Masvidal, former UFC champion, shows up, and they cut a scathing promo, and we're right next to them as they cut this promo. And it was such a cool thing. I actually got to meet Dan Lambert after the promo was over. He was a real nice guy, very cool, was taking pictures with everybody. Jorge did a couple of selfies before he had to take off. It was just a really nice moment, and it was pretty cool. Then the booth started to fill up with AEW talent after they left. Lance Archer was there, the Dark Order was there, Scorpio and Ethan Page were there. There was a group of AEW talent right next to us, and it was freaking cool to be like, look over and you see Archer sitting there watching the show. But as the show began, the crowd electric through everything, man. When Suzuki showed up, I did not expect that many people to know who Minoru Suzuki was, and when the crowd sang Kaze Nino Ray, man, that I was jumping up and down like a maniac just because of how much of a New Japan Pro Wrestling fan I am. And that was an awesome moment. But man, the pop for Adam Cole and Daniel Bryan was utterly ridiculous. It was so loud. It was unreal. God, man, I lost my voice when Daniel Bryan came out. The crowd was buzzing after the show. I actually, when I was walking through the lobby, I actually saw Jordan Oliver and Alley Catch, who were there.
So shout out to Alley Catch, who was on today's taping for Dark.
Oh, I was excited to hear that. I was excited to hear for Alley Catch. She's great. She's a great person and she's a great wrestler. So shout out to her. But
so let me ask you this: with regards to pops, so like we have 4 big pops, right? You have Minoru Suzuki, Ruby Riott, and then Adam Cole, and then Daniel Bryan, or Bryan Danielson. I'm sorry, or as JR calls him, Daniel Bryanson. I was genuinely happy for Ruby because she got this enormous, like, I think if you look at the list, you go, she wasn't the biggest name in the pop list, right? Like, you've got the 2 guys at the end are probably bigger names, but she got this massive reaction. And then and I want to get your perspective on this, because on TV, when it came down to her and Thunder, this was like, holy shit. Like this was not a matchup that I knew I needed until this very moment. Like I didn't think that those worlds were going to collide in such a way that we're going to get it right there. And of course they had a face off and it wasn't like a full match and Ruby won, but like, what was the energy like in the room when it got down to those two?
There was definitely energy about it. I mean, the crowd throughout most of when Thunder came in, the crowd was a lot of the crowd was behind her, and you could tell that Thunder is definitely super over in AEW, as she should, because how talented she is. But then when Ruby and them came back, there was actually a little bit. I'm not sure if it picked it up, but there was a little bit of a Ruby Soho Thunder Rosa dueling chance, a little bit, and it was pretty cool. It was loud though, and when they faced off and started and looked at each other, the crowd was hot for it. They wanted to see this, man, to see Ruby Soho and Thunder go at it. It's like, so I just realized then it was like, I want to see this match. I want to see them put on a 15, 20-minute classic. Well, I don't care where it is. If it's on pay-per-view, if it's on Dark, or I mean not Dark, but on Dynamite, give them time, let them wrestle. Then we could have ourselves a classic. But man, yeah, definitely she got a very great reaction, a big pop, which she deserved. You know, I'm happy for Ruby, and I'm happy she's in AEW now.
Me too. And I want to talk about that on the next segment when we start talking about some of the women's wrestling stuff. But for me at home, like we were on Zoom, and I thought that Adam Cole was going to be the big thing for the night. Like it was, they led up to it. They sort of set the table for a big surprise. It was Adam Cole. It was awesome. Like I thought it was going to be Bryan Danielson, but when it was Adam Cole, it's like, oh, I didn't think that. So I thought that was it. So when Bryan Danielson came out, like it was, my brain was already in the place where, okay, this was our big surprise. The show's going to end now. And then there was more birthday, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Dude, it was unreal because Adam Cole, I knew Bryan Danielson was probably going to show up. I had this feeling. It was already, you know, it's been all over the news. It's been already predicted numerous times. It's kind of like the way it was with CM Punk coming in, but still the reaction was loud. But when Adam Cole came out, I was genuinely shocked because I knew he was coming, but I didn't expect it to be this soon. That's the part that got me. Like to me though, the pop that got me the most though was Minoru Suzuki. That's the one that genuinely shocked the living hell out of me. I had no idea that he was going to show up and face off with Moxley. That was insane.
Yeah, and so Tony, for you, like, you know, you were on Zoom with us that night. Did you feel that too? Like we kind of thought the show was over at that point.
Yeah. I was not expecting Bryan Danielson to come out. But when Adam Cole came out and the pop he got, and of course the crowd with the Adam Cole baby, and then he was standing there, you know that he's aligned with the elite, from the past, but I didn't know if they were going to bring him in to be part of them. And then whenever he went and he hugged them, I was like, well, heck, okay, yeah, and so I thought the show was going to go off, like you said. And then when Flight of the Valkyries came on, that was amazing. And you could tell when he came through the entrance, he was definitely taken back by the crowd reaction, because that crowd was totally for him. And the yes chants, and the yes when he was doing the yes kicks in the ring. I mean, top to bottom, that pay-per-view, I mean, I know it just happened, but that has to be in the top 10 for sure of best pay-per-views of all time that I've seen. But man, I mean, the moments that happened that night with Ruby and with Minoru Suzuki and Adam Cole and Bryan Danielson, and then the moment previous with CM Punk. I mean, AEW is on fire right now. They're on fire, and the flame is getting bigger and bigger each week.
So, and for me, like, I'm a huge fan of the surprises. And of course, you can only have so many surprises. There's only so many big names out there, right? But then WWE releases a whole bunch of people. And you're like, well, wait a minute. Now, and it's not only AEW, because on the WWE side, we got the Brock Lesnar return, which I did not expect at all. So when he came out, I was like, and I'm not even a big Brock Lesnar fan, but I was excited because he was there. Like, it was just a cool thing. Right. And then we saw, of course, CM Punk, we knew was coming. We knew when he was coming. but it didn't make it any less cool. And then, of course, the 4 at All Out. But now you're going, holy crap, they've still got people out there. Braun Strowman's still out there. Adam Scherr is still out there. You know, there's other men and women, Mercedes Martinez. You've still got maybe a Tessa Blanchard. I mean, there's still big names floating out there in the world who can appear to elevate their product. But I do think, and I want to talk about this when we go into the show stuff, because AEW has set themselves, especially this week on Dynamite, where they've got this nice balance of veteran talent who are still at the top of their game, who aren't just coming back for a paycheck and an appearance, and a lot of new talent who can benefit from that, both on the men's and women's rosters. So, and I think the ratings show that. Like, the ratings this week were only 300,000 apart from Raw and Dynamite, which is real close. So Ezra, any other thoughts on that before we move on?
Yeah, just real quick. It's with when you mention the right balance, or when you talk about All Out, we talked about how great the pay-per-view was. You talked about the Adam Cole baby. That pop was, when they yelled that, I swear it was so loud. I thought my ears were going to literally just melt off the sides of my head. It was so loud when and the yes chants were super loud. And like I said, when I was leaving the arena, the crowd was just super jacked. People chanting, yes, Adam Cole, baby, in the concourses, down the stairs, out the building. People blaring Flight of the Valkyries and the Undisputed Era theme song even. There was a car going around blaring the Undisputed Era theme song with the dude standing outside the roof going, Adam Cole, baby. But, man, it was a great time. To me, it is outside of probably All In, it's the best pay-per-view. It's the best wrestling event I've ever seen live and in person.
That's awesome. And I see Vince is in the chat talking about, Bryan Danielson's comments in the post-media scrum. And, he came out and said, like, I'm here to goddamn wrestle. Like, I'm here. He's not coming in the same way Punk did. Punk was coming in as a return and as a name. And Bryan Danielson's like, no. I'm here to show you people how to really do this. Like, y'all think you know how to wrestle? I'm going to show you how to wrestle. You think you're elite? I'm going to show you what it's like to be elite. So I love the difference in attitude for two equal, sort of equals coming in as veterans of the game, both Ring of Honor guys, big stars in WWE, but they're both coming in with different attitudes. And I'm especially after Dynamite this week, I'm super excited to see. I'm almost more excited to see Bryan Danielson's matches than CM Punk's matches, if that makes sense. Right. Just in ring perspective.
It does make sense. It does make sense because Daniel Bryan, to me, is the epitome of professional wrestling. He's been one of the best professional wrestlers the past 15 years. And that's no doubt. And this is a spot where he could prove it. He could show his 100% ability, where WWE, I felt in a sense, in some matches, he was pigeonholed. I feel like in this one, he could really showcase who the American Dragon truly is. And especially with guys like Omega and Cole and whoever else, there's a lot of dream match scenarios that could be set up for this when it comes to Bryan Danielson and who he can face at AEW.
Yeah, and how cool is it that you get a guy like Bryan Danielson who was a massive star in Dragon Gate and Ring of Honor, and then all of his time, so he leaves there as the American Dragon, comes to WWE and has this amazing, storybook career, WrestleMania 30, the Yes Movement. He has to retire because of injury, gets his neck fixed, makes this return, and now we're going, oh my God, like he's at a new place doing big things. And just a few years ago, we were like, this poor guy's never going to wrestle again. But here he is. Like he took the time and saw the doctors and got himself fixed up, and he's figured out how to adjust his style to wrestle a little more safely. So I'm super excited for him. But I did want to move on. I know we'll try to get folks out usually right around 8 o'clock or so, but I did want to touch on last night on SmackDown. There was apparently a women's match scheduled that got kicked for time. That happens all the time. It's not uncommon for men and women to have their matches shortened or cut based on, timing. However, this was a moment, from what I understand from the social media of the talents themselves, this was supposed to include Thea Trinidad or Zelina Vega. And we don't usually use real names, but like she did post this on her personal stuff. that she was supposed to be part of this. And as most people know, Thea's father was in the tower and was one of the victims of 9/11. And they've made, she's been very vocal, and they've allowed her to tell her story in previous years. But they had this 20th anniversary show, and they had the promos and they had the videos, and they didn't include her. And she had special gear made up and everything for it. So there was a big, hashtag last night, give SD women a chance. So what are you guys' thoughts on, and this sort of speaks to the larger product, I think, because we talk about women's wrestling. We're big sponsors of Mission Pro Wrestling. I think a lot of the shows are doing it right. But to me, this was just a real big miss. Tony, what do you think?
I agree with you. It's been a mess in WWE, in my opinion. It's been a mess over there for some time now. To have, and I've said this before, to have WWE Evolution, the women's pay-per-view a few years back, and how great that was, and then to ride the wave of that, and it just went down ever since Evolution. I don't understand if it's a trend to some people over there that women's wrestling is a trend, but it's more than a trend. It's a way of life now. You're seeing women come out in other organizations that are completely shining above the men talent. You're not only talking about women's wrestling being women's wrestling, you're talking about wrestlers, period. Wrestling. No men, no women. It's wrestling, period. And the WWE, for some reason, is dropping the ball on it. You've got all this talent over there, Thea included. You've got Charlotte, Becky, Bailey out with an injury. You've got some top Sasha. You got top names over there, and yet you're not doing anything. You're not allowing them to do what they can do. And I just don't understand what's going on. You go to other places, NWA, Mission Pro, AEW is coming on up with their women's division. You're watching women's wrestling succeed in other places where it should be succeeding in the WWE, the top of the heat, and yet it isn't. So last night was just a travesty, in my opinion, to take a moment away that could have been a special moment on Fox, on national television, a moment that this nation probably would have loved to see, but yet you dropped the ball on it. So I don't get it.
Yeah, and what they could have done, even if it got cut for time, they should have still had it as a dark match and put it on social media. They could have still given her that moment, because their social media has millions of views a week. It has a bigger audience than either of the TV shows. So you could have done something special. You could have given her that moment and given the other women that moment. I know Naomi, it's funny, if you look at Naomi's social media, she actually filmed stuff with Sonya Deville backstage going, hey, what are you doing with my match? And Sonya was in character, and she kept saying, I got to take a call. I can't. We're not going to have time. I'm busy. And they posted it. So I don't know if they're going to make a storyline out of that or whatever, but but I agree about the way that about the way women are presented across the companies, because we were critical of AEW and the way that they were, not the way they were presenting women, but they didn't have a talented enough roster. They didn't have a robust roster, right? They had a lot of new people, which is great, but they didn't have a lot of top talent. And in recent months, they've signed Thunder Rosa, they've signed Ruby Soho. You've got just so many talented women. You've got at least 10 top talents over there now, and 2 television shows and 2 YouTube shows to tell all those stories with, because we saw that on Rampage last night, right? We saw Ruby Soho and Jamie Hayter tear it down. Mm-hmm. Right here, and that was only an hour-long show, and they got like 12 minutes. So and Ezra, you've been a big supporter of women's wrestling through local promotions and obviously the stuff that you go to see. So for you, like across the brands right now, who are a couple of the folks that you think are being presented the best?
To me, when it comes to women's wrestling all across the board, it depends. To me, it's dependent on the company. Like with WWE, they have some of the most talented women on the planet. Not just the Charlottes, the Baileys, the Becky Lynches. You've got women like Liv Morgan, who's vastly improved over the years. You've got you've got Thea, of course, who should have been a women's champion a long time ago, in my opinion. She's so damn talented, but to me, when it comes to like AEW, for instance, yeah, you have Ruby Soho, you have Thunder Rosa, experienced women who've been around the block. Jamie Hayter, who isn't really a well-known face, but she's been in the ring for a good long while. She's very experienced. She was over in Japan for a great number of years, has had experience, and she proved that last night in her match and how crisp and how good she was. And you're right. And you're right about AEW with the talent. A lot of the talent was just too green. They didn't have enough reps yet. You talk about a Julia Hart, who is still relatively young. She's only 19 years old, but she's out there wrestling. You can tell she needs more work, but she's getting there. Ty Conti, who has improved, in my opinion, the most out of those women in AEW. She's really showcasing her skills and becoming one of the top talents there. And she's got a bright future. She was rarely used in NXT, and I'm glad she's getting the opportunity she does now. There's a lot of talent out there. I could see, a lot of great top talent in those companies. It's just a matter of how they're being used. With WWE, I think it's just their inconsistent booking. I think is what it is their inconsistent booking and the lack of time given. AEW at least attempts to give women time. I will say that much. I know they have a pretty crowded roster as it is, and you said, right, it's the right balance of veterans and kind of younger talent. And I think that the Ruby Sohos, the Jamie Hayters, the Thunder Rosas of the world, even Allie, who's been around the block for a long time, she's been around the block for a good long while herself. Those are the women that can help build those other women and bring them forward and help them out. And you got great coaches. You got a Serena Deeb who can help out, backstage, who can help coach these women. You got Dustin Rhodes, who's been working specifically with the women backstage, who's teaching them all the skills needed to be a great professional wrestler. And especially with the Joshi women, like an Emi Sakura, a Riho, Yuka Sakazaki, those women. You got Kenny Omega, who's there helping out too. And, so it's, to me, I think the women's across the board, women's wrestling, and we can't forget about Ring of Honor too with their Women of Honor tournament. Seeing Chelsea Green, seeing Roxy, Amanda Alizé, Maxine and Paler, Mandy Leon, Angelique Love, all those talent. Across the board, women's wrestling is in good hands. It's just got to be booked correctly, and it's got to be showcased correctly. Like the stuff that happened on SmackDown, to me, was borderline disrespectful, and especially to Thea, who deserved the spotlight in memory of her father 20 years ago and what happened with 9/11. I feel like that she should have been on that card wrestling, whether it been singles tag, it don't matter. And like you said, a dark match could have sufficed.
So you said something, and Mrs. Front Row's in the chat, and she's right. Previous years, we've been to Ring of Honor shows, and they have a smattering of women's matches, and we've become friendly with some of the women that have held that title, and they were not treated well as employees or as athletes. However, during the pandemic, there was a complete shift in management in Ring of Honor. We all know this, right? It was public about all this stuff. They rebranded everything. They decided to, instead of having a separate this whole separate Women of Honor thing, no, we're going to have a Ring of Honor women's division. And they hired Maria Kanellis in real life behind the scenes to be in charge of this entire division. And that, like you said, they had the women's tournament, and they've had some awesome women over there. Like you said, we've seen Allison Kay and Roxy, and Sky Blue is over there, and Alex Gracia, and just a lot of the women that we saw from Mission Pro are getting a big opportunity over there. And so I'm excited to see that. I've got to go get caught up on a few of those episodes, but I know we were talking to Sean about this the other night. Shout out to Sean, who was bringing us up to speed on all the different matches and the exciting things they have going on there. So I am encouraged to see that Ring of Honor is playing catch up, and they're building a proper women's division with some young talent and some veteran talent. So I'll be interested to see after the tournament's done, like, what do they do with it? Like, how is it presented? But I want to say, like, we're somewhat critical of WWE. They have amazing talent, right? For me, the programming that presents the women the most accurately and successfully is NXT. And that's not Mission Pro. I'm talking about a weekly television show. Like women, Mission Pro, of course, but they're not a weekly television show. So on regular TV, you have NXT. This week's NXT had 2 or 3 women's matches. Plus, they had the Index stuff, the Indy Hartwell and Dexter Loomis threads, the comedy thread through the entire show. And once they get in the ring, they're never treated like a joke or an object. Like, you get in there and you see Zoe Stark and Io Shirai. Jesus Christ, you put those guys as a tag team? Those 2 women are killing other people. Like, it's insane to me. So to me, if I had to tell somebody today, someone said, where do I go for weekly programming to showcase women? For me, it would be NXT.
Yeah, I agree. And a quick story to piggyback off of that, front row. I was down at the hotel bar earlier. Shout out to Jen, the bartender. And she asked me my plans for this evening, and I told her that I was going to host the show tonight. She said, what show? And I told her about the Nation's Corner. And she asked what we talked about, and I told her professional wrestling, and I specifically told her our subject for tonight about 9/11, and we're going to talk about women's wrestling. And she goes, women's wrestling? And I go, yeah. And she goes, women actually wrestle now? She said, back when I used to watch wrestling back in the 90s, it was all men. And when you see the women, they were all, dressing provocatively and eye candy. And I'm like, Jen, women's wrestling is come a long way, and now it's like the showcase of every show. And she told me that she was going to actually check out. She actually asked me, where can I check out some good women's wrestling? And I gave her a match. I told her about Thunder and Britt. I said, you could probably look it up on YouTube and watch that match. That was a prime example of a good women's match right there. Lights out. NWA is doing some good stuff with women right now. I told her about Mission Pro. So I believe that I actually got through to a non-wrestling fan talking about women's wrestling. So that's my story about piggybacking off of you, front row, that women's wrestling is definitely something to watch now. And like I said earlier, it's not necessarily just women's wrestling. It's professional wrestling, all of it. It's better than some of the men's matches I've seen. They have come a definite long way ever since the Attitude Era. They're really showing out every single time you see anything on pay-per-view or any weekly. They are really balling right now.
Yeah, and if I had to go and show someone a couple of matches from recent years, Sasha Bailey, Brooklyn won.
Yep.
Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker in the Lights Out match. And for me, we've known Thunder for a while, and to see not only the online reaction, which blew up Twitter, but to later on see the footage of them coming through, or Thunder coming through through Gorilla, and see the ovation of her peers, men and women, just hugging and clapping, and it was really, really cool. I just don't want to see anybody taking steps backwards. I'm not a proponent of someone getting a spot because they're a woman or a man. They have to be good, because
Right.
We've seen people get those spots who weren't good, and then they go, well, see, they shouldn't have been in that spot. Right. But you put Jamie Hayter, Ruby Soho, Thunder Rosa, Britt Baker, Hikaru Shida, or Sasha Bailey, Ember Moon, Io Shirai. I mean, there's like 30 to 50 people you could name without even hesitating who could be in those main event spots. So it's just a really exciting time. So yeah, I definitely think that they could have done more there. But I did want to touch on a couple things. I know we're sort of running out of time. What did you guys think about MJF's promos this week? And where's the line? And what's okay for today, for 2021 on network television, or cable television, I should say?
I feel like that MJF being, we know how MJF is. We know that he crosses the line a lot of times. That promo he cut on Wednesday about Brian Pillman Jr. and his family, it might have been slightly a little bit overboard if you don't know who MJF is. But in today's society, I know a lot of people are more PC sensitive about this, but this is stuff that's in normal everyday conversation, even with my friends. So I think this stuff is more acceptable. It wasn't the abortion line. I thought was a little bit that should have never even the word abort shouldn't have been in that promo. Felt like after the swallow comment, then that's when Brian should have attacked MJF. That to me, because of this whole pro-life, anti-life thing that's going on right now, that whole situation, that whole mess, I feel like that maybe that should have been cut. But otherwise, I felt the promo that MJF did, I don't think it crossed the line too far.
So Vince says something in the chat that's interesting because of the Max Caster stuff from last month, that the MJF stuff didn't seem bad by comparison. I agree, because he didn't say anything about rape or racist comments or
mental illness.
Or mental illness. Yeah, he didn't attack her in that way, or it's interesting. So Mrs. Front Row says, I think families are off limits. But the interesting thing about like the wrestling families is they want to be part of the action. We know that Brian Pillman Jr.'s family is part of the industry. We know that they were really excited to be on camera. And I think that they also know the deal so much that they know it's kind of hard to offend them unless you really go way over the line. I didn't see him say anything that they didn't see as a character. Was it terrible? Sure, but he's a bad guy. He's going to say horrible things about people, but like, he's a bad guy. The whole point is that, Brian Pillman Jr. is supposed to come out and beat the crap out of him. Like, that's what that's supposed to be. I do think that MJF he's talented because he so carefully threads that line. If you meet him in public, you will not get Max. You will get MJF. I know people who have met him at restaurants and wish they hadn't. So,
I wanted to add to that. Bully says it all the time on Busted Open. You're trying to get heat, and Bully, coming from Bully, he is one of the masters at getting heat. Heat Wave 99. But he says two things that you stay away from: politics and religion. Other than that, it's fair game. I believe that it was entertaining. The promo was entertaining Wednesday night. Yes, it was a shock value promo. Things he's talked about, but you know what? You're trying to get heat, and you're trying to get heat in the hometown where he lives, where Brian Pillman Jr. lives. So, you're trying to get heat, and I believe he did that. I believe that he succeeded in what he was trying to do. And I said it on Twitter the other day. I believe Pillman Jr. came out. He was more worried about getting that hometown pop than he was actually going and taking care of business getting into the ring. He seemed like he came across as a deer in the headlights, but that being said, it didn't take away from the segment. I still enjoyed it. It just, MJF is one of the top heels in the business right now, and like Front Row said, you're going to get MJF anytime you see him in public or whatever. You're getting heel MJF. You're not getting, even on social media, you get heel MJF everywhere. Every time I see something from MJF, you're seeing that character. I could give a crap less about his personal life because I don't want to see that. I want to kayfabe. I want to see, when I approach MJF at a restaurant or at a meet and greet, I want him to slap the pen out of my hand. I want him to take my 8x10, rip it up, and flip me off or whatever. He's a heel. He's doing what he's got to do, and I feel like that is a lost art in today's wrestling. Back in the day, the story's been told about the Freebirds. They were getting their tires slashed, their vehicles keyed, death threats. Back in the day, back in World Clash, they were on top of the game on the hillside. So I believe that social media is taken away from that aspect of professional wrestling. you see Alexa Bliss's Instagram or whatever, you're seeing her on TV as a scary character or whatever, but on Instagram or Twitter, you're seeing her out with her boyfriend, fiance, as who she is in real life. So, there's that line, but I believe that heat was attained on Dynamite and by MJF, and I believe that as long as you stay away from certain topics that are going to be hot button topics or whatever, I think everything's fair game.
It's interesting because Miss Front Row says in the chat they sold rocks to throw at the heels, and we heard $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase talk about that when they would go to Mexico and Puerto Rico. They would sell for like $3 or $5 a bag of rocks to throw at the performers. Like, wow. Holy crap! And that is, I guess, in the 80s. But like, can you imagine? Yeah. Imagine going to a Dynamite and like, here's some D-cell batteries to throw at MJF.
Wow.
But I do think like, it's weird because we all have our own topics, our own hot button things. There's stuff that won't bother me. That's stuff that will, as she says in the chat, things like recovery stories and like the Jeff Hardy stuff. And even though he wrote that storyline, it was still like, I didn't really think it was appropriate, but whatever. It was their thing. But I think that because they're such a global brand, MJF is one of those rare talents who's figured out how to do it without getting into genuine trouble. Like Max Caster got into genuine trouble, like because he said stuff he wasn't supposed to say. But MJF, he thinks long and hard about the stuff that he says to make sure that it's going to not get them thrown off TV or lose advertisers. But he's very clearly in character. So, and I know Bully talks about getting heat, but like, look, these people don't want to go out there and get beat up in real life. They don't want someone showing up at their house with a gun, especially the women. I mean, we hear horror stories of like the Sonya Deville stuff from 2020 and all this other stuff. So I think we're living in a different environment too, where people's personal information is more accessible. So if you really generate a lot of heat, someone could show up at your house. And so I get from that perspective why a performer has to be careful about how much actual heat they generate.
Right.
So I did think it was funny on social media yesterday on Twitter, Baron Corbin and MJF were going back and forth making fun of New Jersey. And I'm like, this is great because I love the two companies, the two big bad heels, and each company are just shitting all over New Jersey. And of course, Dave LaGreca being from New Jersey and all this other stuff. Like, I love stuff like that. And so just a couple things real quick, some housekeeping before we go. I did want to give a shout out to the NWA social media team who continues to foster this like environment of inclusivity and the community across the brands. They are congratulating people on their birthdays and births of children and like across all brands. When Big E won the Money in the Bank, they congratulated him. When it was, someone's birthday in AEW, they post a birthday wish. And I just love seeing that because to me, it brings me back to what Nick Aldis told us on the show earlier this year. Like the lines between the companies are not real. They're made up by the fans. And at any time, anything can happen if the business is right. And boy, are we seeing that. So, and we talked about that on the Empower special about how there were 5 or 6 different companies represented in the NWA over the course of 2 days and all the pay-per-views and stuff. So the other thing I did want to say is, shout out to Mission Pro Wrestling. Tomorrow they have their Tussle in Tulsa. It'll be on the Title Match Network. I want to say it's either 8 or 8:30 Eastern. RA would have to keep me honest. I know he's going to be there. So, if you get a chance, make sure you subscribe to Title Match Network and watch them. It's going to be an exciting show. Thunder Rosa is defending her Warriors women's Warrior Championship against Maddie Rankowski tomorrow, right?
Yep. She's defending the Warrior Wrestling Women's title that she won from Kylie Ray recently at Warrior Wrestling Stadium Series.
That's awesome. That's going to be a great match. I've been a huge fan of Maddie Rankowski. We interviewed her last year and then spent some time with her. We interviewed her again in Buda and talked to her a little bit. She's been all over AEW programming. Personally, I think she'd be great in NXT. But AEW seems to be a good fit for her as well. She's got a great look and she's super talented. And she's tall. She's got a lot of the athleticism of of a taller athlete. So it's pretty cool. Ari says the show is at 4 p.m. Central, so that's 5 Eastern. Okay, thanks, Ari. I'll go back and look at the what the Title Match Network is advertising for a start time, and we'll make sure that we're on Zoom for that tomorrow night.
Yeah, I talked to him earlier, and he asked me about that also. He said pay-per-views are normally 7, right? And I said, yeah, but the 4, since they're saying 4, that's probably the meet and greet. You want to get there beforehand. There's probably going to be a meet and greet beforehand. So I told him to make sure he gets there kind of early. If he gets there early, so what? He's going to have a great time tomorrow.
He is going to have a great time. And so for folks that want to watch the show, just go on Mission Pro Wrestling's website or go on to their social media or Title Match Network and look for the start time. And we'll post it out on our socials as well before the show starts tomorrow. So I know we're a little bit past. Is there anything you guys wanted to cover before we wrap up for the evening?
No, I'm good. Just want everybody to have a great night tonight and catch anytime any professional wrestling's on, pay-per-view wise, television wise, whatever. Just be a fan, be a great fan, and enjoy it. Sit back and just be entertained like you're supposed to be. Put your critical side aside and just enjoy professional wrestling.
Ezra?
Really, the only thing I saw that John in South Jersey also said tomorrow night is the ROH pay-per-view Death Before Dishonor as well. The main is going to have some great matches. From what I can see here, the main event is a 4-way match. Bandito defending ROH World Title against Brody King, Demonic Flamita, and EC3.
Wow.
So that's going to be a hell of a card. That'll be on, of course, 8/7 Central on Honor Club, ROHWrestling.com. But just thank you to everybody watching the show. Appreciate it. Have a great night. And of course, happy wrestling, everybody, as Ian Riccaboni always says.
So we will appreciate everybody joining us tonight. Next week, I'm not sure if there will be a show or not. I'm planning on it, but Tony and Deb and a lot of our other hosts will be in Philadelphia for the big event next weekend. So there'll be a lot of folks doing that. Maybe we'll get some folks posting some videos and pictures from the events, and we'll be able to share that with everybody on the socials. So stay tuned. And so I am Front Row at WWE Front Row. Tony Justice. Tony, you are
at Tony Justice, AJFA, and you know what that means.
Ezra?
Yep, and of course I'm at Deadman469 on Twitter, Deadman151 everywhere else.
Yep, and we are the Nation's Corner across pretty much all the socials. Look for our new QR code on our site and on our Facebook page. Shout out to Hijacker Mike for putting that together for us, and you can just get all of our information with one quick scan. So enjoy the rest of your weekend, folks. Talk to you later.